What do you see as the governor's role in preventing hate crimes like the mass killings at the Pittsburgh synagogue? Mr. Gonzalez, you're up on this.
I think it's more important than ever that we have public leaders, including a governor, who is speaking out forcefully against hate crimes. The tragedy in Pittsburgh was a despicable act of hate and violence. And our president is inciting this type of conduct with his hateful and divisive language. And we need public leaders who are going to stand up forcefully against it. I went recently to stand with members of the community in Reading, where they recently found 2 swastikas in their high school. I went last weekend to a rally with transgender people who were rallying to not only pass Question 3, but against hate. We're living in a really difficult time right now, and we need public leaders who are being forceful and standing up to the types of comments our president makes.
Are you saying, I want to interrupt, are you saying that Governor Baker has not stood up?
I don't think he's done enough, no. In speaking out against our president, no.
Governor Baker.
Well, let me start by saying that one of the things we did as an administration about 2 years ago when we saw the spike in hate crimes was we put a task force together. And that task force has members of the faith community, the law enforcement community, and the education community. They meet on a regular basis. They engage in others' discussions around sharing intelligence, awareness, best practices, and other kinds of opportunities to improve the way we all deal with these issues. And first of all, I think that's the most important thing you need to do. Create a mechanism and vehicle through which all of the affected players who can participate and prevent this sort of thing from happening to engage in that discussion. The second thing you do is you continue to build on the bipartisan efforts that have been pursued here around gun control. We were one of the first states in the country to eliminate bump stocks after that horrible tragedy in Nevada. We're also one of the few states in the country to pass extreme risk protection order legislation. And many times, I had people, John Rosenthal from Stop Handgun Violence in my office today, talking about the work that's been done here in the Commonwealth on gun control and things we can do going forward. But I happen to think that the things we do that are effective are every bit as important as what we say. And I've stood up and spoken out against the president on numerous occasions because his language in many cases is destructive and appalling. And you disagree with that?
I do, and you know, I do think it matters what you say as governor, and also what you do. Some of the gun legislation, the common sense gun laws that were put in place happened in spite of Governor Baker, not because of his leadership. And Governor, you are supporting Maura Healey's opponent, Jay McMahon, to replace her as Attorney General, who has said he believes there's a God-given right to assault weapons, who recently said immigrants are savages. Talk about hate. Why do you think he would be a better Attorney General than Maura Healey?
First of all, with respect to my position on whether I supported or encouraged or watched from behind with respect to our gun laws here in the Commonwealth, I was the first governor in the country to talk about the importance of getting rid of bump stocks. And I work collaboratively with my colleagues in the legislature on both that legislation and on ERPO. And I have a D rating from the NRA and an F from Goal. And I was proud to have the endorsement of Everytown for Gun Safety, which is one of the largest and most important gun control advocacy groups in the United States.
Well, Governor, why do you think Jay McMahon will be a better Attorney General than Maura Healey?
I've worked closely with the Attorney General on all kinds of issues, and we've had a good working relationship. But I said months ago I was going to support the ticket, and I'm going to live up to my commitment on that.
So you believe he would be a better Attorney General than her?
I said I was going to support the ticket. But as I said, I've worked carefully and closely with the Attorney General on a variety of issues. We have a good working relationship.
So this is important, because the governor is saying his loyalties to the Republican Party, regardless of the consequences, regardless of having someone who's going to go in to be our Attorney General or to replace Elizabeth Warren in the United States Senate, who's anti-choice, who is anti-common sense gun laws, anti a lot of the stuff you say you're for. And if you were really committed to common sense gun laws, you wouldn't be asking the people of this state, and you personally wouldn't be voting to support them, to put them in office.
I think it's pretty clear where I am on common sense gun laws. And by the way, this isn't a race for Attorney General. It's not a race for the U.S. Senate. It's a race for governor. And I'll put my track record on these issues up against anybody.
This is important. It is a race for governor. I know that. But you just have proved my point, Governor. You don't think it matters. And we've got a president right now who is threatening our values, who is taking this country backwards, who's threatening our democracy. And you are putting loyalty to the Republican Party above your commitment to these values.
Governor Baker,
and I think it matters, which is why I'm running for governor and not some other place, because I think we need a governor who's going to stand up and be consistent on these issues.
15 seconds, and then we have to move on.
I didn't vote for Donald Trump. I don't plan to vote for him if he runs for re-election. Most people know where I'm coming from with respect to the president. On numerous issues, I've worked collaboratively with Democrats and Republicans to repel and appeal and work against a series of his initiatives. And I would add, in many cases, we've been successful. And I think in some respects, our ability to succeed and be effective on these issues really makes a difference for people here in Massachusetts.
All right.